So this is kind of a very scary moment because I have never really talked about this other than for a few handful of people, which includes my family and maybe a couple of friends. So, but it's, you know, just been heavy on my heart that I kind of share this because I'm actually surprised by the amount of people that have come up to me and have sat in my chair at work and just out of nowhere started sharing their experiences and things that they're going through that are everything that I have went through in the past year. And when I started telling them, well, you know, I've actually experienced the same thing, and then they just sit there and they cry in my chair, and I just feel like I needed to make this to give people hope because one, I think I was probably one of the last people I think that would have experienced something like this because I've always been a happy, bubbly, you know, carefree person. And then last year I was diagnosed with chronic depression, and I already know, like, I'm gonna cry during this whole video, I'm sure, just because it's touchy to talk about, but I wanted to make this video as raw as possible, and I wanted to make sure that whoever's going through this, that you're not by yourself, and the people you least expect to go through it are going through it or have conquered it. And the reason I wanted to share it is because I am so much better now. And honestly, if it weren't for God, and I promise you, you know, medicine, it did wonders, but God worked a miracle, and that's really why I wanted to share this. So, because, you know, when you hear about depression, it's a hard thing to talk about, and unless you've been through it or you've experienced it with a family member, no one will really understand. And people who are depressed we're not going to talk about it, and we're not going to, you know, let you see us depressed. I remember having to go to work every day for a year, and I remember I would sit down with my client and we do a consultation and I do their hair, and then as soon as they were processing, I would go in the back room when nobody was watching and I would cry until the timer went off. And it was hard because I didn't want my family to know. I didn't want my friends to know. In fact, I even had trouble telling myself, you really need help. Depression is an evil spirit. It is a sickness. It is awful, and I wouldn't want to wish it on anybody ever. But I was going through a lot of life changes. For some reason, at the end of 2016, my birthday's on New Year's Eve, and I remember being so upset that day, and I couldn't, you know, quite put my finger on it, but something kind of kept telling me, like, 2017 is gonna be a bad year. And I just thought that's so strange because I've never had a bad year, you know, that's not something I would ever tell myself or even consider. But it was, and I honestly would never, ever, ever want to relive 2017 again, but it has definitely changed me. It's done a lot of things for me, and I feel like it's fixing to open a lot of doors for me. And even right now, if me talking about this in this video, if it could just help one person, or it could give one person hope that you can conquer it and you can get over this, then that's really my goal. So, because honestly, I wished that I had somebody to either, you know, come forward or, you know, not keep it such a secret, because we all suffer alone. And unless, you know, you seek a therapist or you seek a group or a friend who is going through the same thing, you really do suffer alone, and it really is suffering. I don't know any other way to explain it. Depression is uncomfortable to talk about, and anyone going through it, we can't explain it, but I'm going to try to explain what I went through. And I'm not at all by any means making this video for a pity party or, you know, for attention or anything like that. I just simply want people to know, because no, we're not really aware. You know, I was never aware of depression. You know, you kind of hear about it and you may see somebody who's experiencing it, but we all just ignore it. It's something we all sweep under the rug. And the worst thing I think you can do for a depressed person is tell them to either suck it up, or you need to smile, or, you know, you are so blessed and blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, you know, it's not that easy. We can't just smile and, you know, hope everything's gonna be all right. Honestly, it is really feeling already dead. There is, I don't know everybody's level of depression. I've only experienced what I've experienced, and all I can tell you is that you just feel like your soul went somewhere and your body's just here. And you walk around feeling like nothing. And I know you're gonna cry, but I don't feel like that anymore. But it's just so fresh and it's just so new. So I'm still in that stage of like, it's hard to talk about, but anyway, so I guess I was going through so many life changes. I had just turned 21 and I was in my first year of marriage, and I was living in a house that was being remodeled, and I had just started my full-time career. And, you know, kind of being your own boss and being an entrepreneur is very hard when you're first starting out. And then I have so many life changes going on, and it kind of starts out to, depression comes from already broken places in your life, and whatever it can feed on inside of you that's already broken, it just attaches to that and just runs with it. And so, you know, there's times in my life as, I guess, a child or a teenager that maybe things that have been said to me, or when I needed somebody, it felt like I didn't have anybody. Or I think really what I struggled with growing up was not having anybody understand what I was going through. I always felt, I don't want to say the black sheep because it always sounds negative, but I did feel different from the rest of my family, not in a bad way. I was very talkative, and I never met a stranger, and I was just out there and I wasn't scared of anything. And I don't know, I feel like it just set me aside from everybody else, and I felt like nobody really understood me and kind of understood my ambitions and what I wanted to do. And I always felt like I was too much for everybody, that I was either too talkative or too this or too that, and it wasn't in me to just not be anything. You know, I just always felt like I was going to be something greater. And, you know, and then it turned into, I felt like I had to be the best at everything, and if I wasn't the number one at something, I didn't want to do it, because I always felt like, I don't know if I felt like I had to prove a point or if it was for attention. I'm really not sure, but I just always felt like my life had to be a competition and I had to be number one. And when I wasn't, even if I tried my absolute best with something and it just still wasn't, you know, number one, I would beat myself up so bad. And I don't know, I grew up in a family of pastors, and I just wanted to make everybody proud. And I felt like I was on a pedestal and I didn't want to disappoint anybody. So I made it, you know, like my life goal, not really to be perfect, but I guess, you know, pretty close to it, because I wanted to show everybody, like, look, I can do this, and I can set myself aside from the world and not be like everybody else, and I don't have to drink or curse or smoke or all these other things. And I tried really hard to just be different from everybody and show everybody that I was a good person. And honestly, it was so exhausting, because if you are a good person, you don't ever have to prove it, you just be. And I couldn't just be. And so I think that's pretty much the background of where all this kind of started. And so anyway, I guess when I finally hit, you know, that point of, you're gonna be in your full career now, and you're gonna be married, and you're gonna be living in a house that's being remodeled, and it's a lot of change at once. And I think that's kind of what finally just did it for me. And so I don't remember exactly when it started. I think it was a little bit, you know, before I got married, that the depression really started to come in. And I would have really bad episodes where I would have meltdowns, and I had different triggers, and certain things would trigger my meltdowns, and I just kind of would go off the wall, and I would cry and yell, and I would just well, I kind of like a panic, and then I'd go into a panic, and then I couldn't breathe, and it just felt like the world was just collapsing on me. And it would be over something like really small. To most people, be like, why are you even upset about this? Or everything that was so like minuscule was huge to me, so huge to me. And everything hurt all the time. You know, you said something off the wall to me, it would hurt my feelings, and which I was always kind of a sensitive person, but never to the point like this. And so I'm gonna try not to like dwell on this like too much, but I'm gonna try and give some details of some things that I went through. So I would have meltdowns. Well, then it turned into a lot of my body just really started shutting down. So like I would break out in hives, like chronic hives for like, I remember broke out every day for like 12 weeks. And I don't know if that was just too much stress, because I'm definitely not allergic to anything. So there was that. And I pretty much would cry every single day. I felt helpless 24/7. And it's just hard to explain, because you're probably just in here thinking like, you know, that's just your state of mind, that's just the way you're thinking, but it's so much deeper than that. It really is a sickness. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And the worst part is you don't recognize it as that. You just feel like you're in a funk, but then when you realize your funk has lasted for 6 months, then you realize, well, maybe this isn't normal. Well, then it, you know, slowly but surely started getting worse. And it got to the point I couldn't get out of the bed. I was constantly late for work. I didn't even want to go to work, but people depended on me, and I didn't want to lose on business and those relationships with people, and my job was important to me, even though it didn't feel very important at the time. And I would have to just suck it up and go to work. And I could tell my coworkers kind of knew something was wrong with me, but I just kept putting it off as I'm just stressed. I'm stressed out. I'm just going through a lot right now. And so nobody would ever really ask, and I didn't want anybody to ask. It was a point where you want somebody to understand you, but you know that they're not, so you don't really bother with it. Because, you know, I would kind of tell, you know, people, well, you know, this is really bothering me, or, you know, this really hurts me, and they're like, what? Like, it was just, nobody got it. So I just learned to not tell anyone, because nobody else was gonna get it. And then you isolate yourself, and that's really hard. Because then at that point, you really do have no one. And you don't isolate yourself because you want to, you kind of feel like you have to. Because otherwise, to other people, you're gonna come off as crazy, or, you know, I don't know, they'll make some assumption, and then you're still just gonna be by yourself. So, or they're, a lot of times too, they think, oh, well, you're too sensitive, or you're so dramatic, and really it's, that would break me even more, because it was just a cry for help. And sorry, I really don't want to cry through this whole video, but anyway, so I had one really bad panic attack, and I didn't know it was a panic attack. I had never experienced one. I didn't really know what they were like. But I couldn't, my whole body went numb, and I couldn't feel it, and I ended up like having to go to the hospital, and they did like a CAT scan, and they were like, we don't see anything wrong with you, we don't know what's wrong with her. I was fine, everything was normal, but I had just overworked something in my mind so much that I went into full panic, and I couldn't feel my body, and I couldn't stand, and honestly, I barely could see. I mean, it's just crazy what can actually happen to you, and you feel like you really just have no control over yourself or over your emotions. And it was scary. And then eventually you just start to feel nothing. So I went through that. I pretty much ruined everything I came in contact with. I ruined a lot of times that should have been good memories, and they weren't, because I cried through the whole thing, or I just wanted to be shut up in my room. I spent so much time in my room, I'm honestly like sick of being in there. That was my safe place, and I would not leave it all day. My friends would ask me to hang out, and I would say, oh no, I'm busy, or I can't, or I just got off work and I'm really tired, and my family would want to see me, and I would be like, you know, just really exhausted, and I would never go see them. And if I did, it would be for 5 minutes and then I'd go home, and I would have to just shut myself in my room. And it was kind of weird what it did to me, because then I would like digress. So I would try to convince myself to think of things before this started happening to me. So like, it was like almost I would digress to my childhood. So I would put on the Disney Channel on my laptop and watch like Lizzie McGuire or That's a Raven, or something back when life was innocent and when life was not hard. And I thought, if I can revert back to that, almost as if I thought I could restart everything all over in my mind. So that would calm me down for a little bit. It helped some. But then it started getting to the point where I would have meltdowns, and I would call my grandma and I'd be like, look, you've got to pray for me. And it would be like in the middle of the night, like 11:30 at night, midnight. And I would call her crying, and I'd be like, will you please pray for me? You've got to pray for me. And it was like maybe for 5 minutes I'd feel okay. And I would just cry myself to sleep and hope the next day that I'd be fine. And then I just got to the point where I was just so numb all the time, and the only emotion I knew was to be sad, and that was all I knew. And you don't realize that until you are able to feel something other than that, which is when I started therapy, but you know, I'll get to that in a second. So it got to the point where I would try to pray myself out of it, but it's almost like I felt like God couldn't hear me. And you know, I grew up a Christian, and I grew up in a Christian home, and anytime I was going through something, I'd always pray about it and I'd feel better, or you know, I'd have faith that things were going to work out. But it was like, for some reason, it was like there was no connection between me and God anymore. It was almost like he couldn't hear me, and I was like, man, what have I done that was so horrible that even, you know, God couldn't answer, you know, what was happening in my life. And I couldn't understand why I felt this way and why I couldn't get out of it. And it turned into, I'd wake up in the morning, and if I was on the way to work, I would literally just pray, please let an 18-wheeler hit me and just take me out. And because I didn't want to be here anymore, but I didn't want to physically harm myself. I couldn't do that, but I would pray that something would happen to me, or that I'd be, you know, in a bad position, and, you know, somebody would do it for me, or, and I know that's really horrible to say, and that's even hard to admit, but that's just where I was at that time. And I would get up every morning and I would cry the whole way to work, and I'd be like, God, please just let, you know, somebody, you know, the night before I've been drinking and be drunk and just hit me, or please let somebody swerve into my lane. And I would just hope something like that would happen. And obviously it didn't, because I'm still here, but that was just my way of thinking, because I felt so hopeless that I thought that was my only answer. I was like, God, if I can't have peace on earth, you know, could you please just take me? And that's really hard to talk about too, so I might not go into too much depth into that. And then you had to feel with the guilt of, you know, God gave me this life and I don't even want it. That was really hard too. And then I felt really guilty because, you know, you feel so by yourself, but deep down you know that people need you. And I knew what it would do to my family if I wasn't here anymore. I knew what it would do to my husband if I wasn't here anymore. But you feel so helpless and so numb, it doesn't matter. So anyway, I was so desperate to not feel that way anymore. So if that's what it took, then that's what it took. And so I really sympathize with people who do feel suicidal or do feel like they don't want to live anymore. And it is so awful. And I am so sorry if you're experiencing that, but please don't do it, because honestly, if you finish watching this video, there is hope and you can get through it. And that's why I really wanted to make this. That's why, you know, when people put online, you know, I'm just really depressed or this, that, and the other, it's like, I think sometimes people try to glorify depression, and it's not something that I ever want anybody to experience, ever. And I am so sorry to any families if you've ever lost someone to depression or lost someone from suicide, it is really horrible. And if you do have someone in your family that you're questioning about that, please help them. Please find a way to seek some help for them. Because honestly, if it wasn't for my family suggesting therapy and, you know, having a talk with me and saying it's going to be okay, I don't know if I would be sitting here making this video right now, to be quite honest with you. Because I honestly am scared if I would have gone any longer in the state that I was. I really don't know. You know, I say I wouldn't want to harm myself, but I really don't know what I would have done. So I'm just really thankful to be here, and I'm thankful to be healed and not in that state of mind anymore. But anyways, so I remember one night I had a really bad meltdown, and my husband was home, and he basically was like, look, I'm gonna have to take you to the hospital. There's no other way. I don't know what to do with you. And I just knew I could not go to the hospital. I know everybody that works there. I do their hair. It's like, I cannot let people see me like this. I don't want people talking about me. And so he just held me till I cried myself to sleep that night. And the next day I had to go pick something up from my parents' house, and I knew I didn't want to stay long, and I knew I was still recovering from my meltdown the night before. And but I went anyways, and my mom just kind of was like, why are you leaving? You just got here. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm just really tired and I just need to go home. And, you know, she was like, well, something is wrong with you. And, you know, people do notice when you're not yourself anymore, and that, you know, when you're depressed. And it's probably best if you know someone like that to ask, because we're not going to come out and tell you, because one, we're ashamed of it. We know nobody's going to understand it, and we're embarrassed by it. So, and then on top of that, we don't want to worry people. And so it's already a really negative situation, and we really don't want to draw any negative attention to it. So, anyway, my mom and sister kind of sat me down, and they're like, you know, is something going on at home that you need to tell us? Well, you know, I didn't want them to think, you know, like there was something going on between me and my husband or anything like that. And so I really didn't want to tell them. But, you know, I guess it kind of in a way wasn't fair if they were worried about me to not tell. So I burst into tears, and I was like, I'm not well. And they're like, well, I think we can tell. And I was like, I don't even want to live anymore. It's that bad. And so naturally, you know, they got really upset, and I felt really bad about that. But, you know, Mom was kind of, well, what are you upset about? Is it something in particular? And I was like, no, something finally just snapped in me, and I can't handle life anymore. I said, I said, I know Logan is somewhere, but I don't know where she is, and I don't know where she went, and I don't know how to find her. And so my dad comes in the room, and he asked what was wrong, and I didn't want to tell. And Mom was like, well, I think we need to get her some help. We need to get her a doctor. And I think that's probably the worst thing you can hear, is you need to seek therapy. That to me was horrible. I don't know why. I guess, I don't know, something about that. I think that just made me feel crazy, and that really upset me. I didn't want to, but if it's what I had to do to find myself again, then I was just gonna have to do it. So, you know, my family made me feel a lot better. They're like, you know, it's okay to not be okay. And sometimes you do have to seek a doctor if your mind is in that state. And thank God I did. It was definitely the last thing I wanted to do, but I was glad that I did it. So I saw a doctor in the next state over, because I did not want anybody, and I mean, I did not want anybody to know what I was going through at all. I was so ashamed and so embarrassed. I wanted to make sure that I would not run into anybody that I knew. So I started seeing this therapist, and it's actually kind of funny, because he's like 75. And I remember going in and thinking, oh my gosh, like there's no way that this man is going to help me. He's so old. I love him though. He has saved my life, and I owe a lot to him. But So I sit down in the chair and he just looks so optimistic, and I remember just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like where do I even begin? So he asked me and he was like, well, what's going on? And I'm just trembling, because how do you even begin to tell someone what you're going through, especially a total stranger, especially some way older man? Instantly, I just kind of burst into tears, and I was like, I really don't know where to begin, but my name is Logan, except I don't know who that is or where she is. And I was like, I just feel like my soul is elsewhere and my body's just walking around. I was like, I don't really know what started it. And instantly, you know, I think that was like the only sentence I said, because I kept crying and I couldn't get myself together. And he was like, it's okay. This is a safe place. And he was like, I'm sure you probably know by now, but you are depressed. He's like, but I promise you, there's no reason why you cannot get better. And he said, we are going to talk this through. And he was like, you are going to have to be on medication, but we're going to train your brain to, you know, not feel this way anymore, and to not think this way anymore. He said it may take some time, but he's like, you're going to do it. And honestly, just to have somebody in my corner who did not look at me a different way, who did not think I was dramatic or think I was too sensitive or think I was crazy, helped me a lot. Honestly, I think I left from that appointment feeling actually a lot better. I knew I wasn't better, but I felt a lot more hopeful, because I felt like I had somebody on my side. And that's really important when you're going through this sickness, because you are ultimately alone. And so I started seeing him, and I would go probably like a couple times a month. And it helped a lot. And honestly, some days I would go in and we wouldn't even talk about what I had experienced since I last saw him, because I would have at least one meltdown in between each visit. But I would just kind of say, well, you know, I kind of had a little bit of a meltdown, but I'm okay now. And we just, you know, sometimes we didn't even have to talk about that. And I think just having somebody talk to you was just amazing. Somebody who wouldn't judge you was really helpful. So, I mean, immediately I had to start medications. And so one was for the depression and the other one was just to focus. And I remember sitting in my car, I got to work, and I was gonna take my first pill. And I was petrified, because I had just read the label and I read all the side effects, and they were really bad side effects. So I was obviously petrified. And then naturally, kind of when you're depressed, you're pretty much scared of everything anyway, so no surprise there. So I remember I prayed before I took it, and then I walked into work. And naturally I was already sad and I didn't want to be at work. And so I went in and I talked to my client, and I went back to mix up my color. And when I came back out, it was so weird, and I will never forget this. I had been so sad, which felt like forever, it was about a year, that I really ultimately forgot any other emotion and what it felt like. I was so used to pretending I was happy and putting on a smile, and I really didn't know what happiness felt like anymore. And I remember once that medicine kicked in, it's like I felt joy, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this what that feels like? Which is really sad and kind of pathetic, but I was so deep into sadness that honestly, to feel joy, I just, you know, I tried to hold back tears, because I couldn't believe that it had been so long since I felt that. And so I went in to do my client's hair, and I remember just talking her head off, and I think that was the most I had talked probably all year. And when I got done with my work day, I stayed an extra hour and a half to just talk with my coworkers and to help clean up the shop, and just things I wouldn't have done over the past year. You know, I tried to hurry up and get out of there and not talk to anybody. And I remember sitting there, and my coworker, which, you know, like I said, nobody had confronted me about what I was going through or anything like that. Nobody really wanted to pry. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, I am so glad to see you smile today. And I think, well, that's one of the things I'll probably never forget, because people do see what you go through, but I think really nobody knows how to approach it. And people noticed that I wasn't well, but it made me feel good in that moment that somebody cared about me. And that really made me feel good. And I said, yeah, I feel good today. And just that small little moment, it really meant a lot to me. I'm not sure why. I think it was just good that somebody wanted to see me happy. And I was glad. I was so thankful that day to experience that. I went home from work and I came in the door, and my husband was like, well, how was your day? And I genuinely smiled, you know, from ear to ear. And I said, I forgot what it felt like to be happy. And I am so glad I got to feel that today. And so, you know, that was the beginning of my healing. And I tried to never miss church, and I prayed all the time. And there were times where I would still have meltdowns, and I felt so helpless, and I still felt like there was still a disconnection between me and God, and I just couldn't understand why he didn't hear me, and why I just couldn't get better. Like, why couldn't you work this miracle overnight? Why couldn't I just wake up and be fine? And I really struggled with that, because I felt like I had done something to deserve it. And that was really hard to deal with, because I had to rethink my whole life and think, what did I do to get here and why? And sorry, I really am trying to not cry, but it's just impossible at this point. So I remember one night I had a really bad meltdown, and I was home by myself. And on top of that, I was really upset that I was upset, because I was working really hard to get better, and I was starting to do better, and then I would have a slip up, and it was hard. And because you would feel a lot of guilt for feeling that way, because I felt like I was making everybody proud by doing better, and and then on top of that, I felt like I was, you know, letting myself down. And I started to go into panic mode, and I knew when I would get into panic mode, my throat would close up, and I feel like I couldn't breathe, and then my heart would palpitate. And it's a really scary feeling, especially if you're home alone, because you just feel like you're gonna die, and there's no other way to explain it other than that. And all of a sudden, I just heard God say in my head, you need to go in your room and you need to go pray. And I'm just in the living room on the couch. I'm like, well, I don't understand why I can't just pray right here, but okay. And so I went into my room, and I just knelt at the end of my bed, and I just burst into tears. And I was like, God, I don't understand, and I don't know why I'm having to go through this. And I was like, can you please just make it go away? And then I hear nothing, and I feel nothing. And I was like, why? Why me? And still nothing. And I was like, I really give up. I am so tired of doing this. It has been a year, and I'm so tired. I was tired so long ago, and I reached my breaking point so long ago, and I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then finally, I heard, you have to keep fighting. And that still rings so strong in my head. And I just started crying even harder. And I was like, why? I don't understand why I have to keep fighting. What am I even fighting for? Why am I even having to fight this period? And over and over, I heard, you have to keep fighting. You have to keep fighting. And then that was just it. And I didn't understand. I felt like I was never going to understand. And I just had to have the will to just keep fighting. And fighting for my health and my right state of mind to completely be better. And I knew if that's what I had to do, then that was just what I had to do, because nobody wants to feel this way, and I certainly was so tired of feeling this way. So naturally, I just kept going day by day, And when I would start to have negative thoughts, I would pray and try and pray it off me. And I would say, I'm not going to think this way. I'm not going to do this to myself. I have to get better. And I just had to keep telling myself that every single day. Anytime I had a bad thought, which was multiple times a day, probably every other second. And it's hard because how many times a day do you have to tell yourself to not think about bad things and not to be so hard on yourself and to not feel so negative about everything all the time? It's so hard, especially if that's the only way you've thought for a year, in which I know people go through depression so much longer than that. So I am thankful that I only went through it for, you know, like a year and a half. But I remember I started doing a lot better. My meltdowns became like, I'd have them like once a month, and I was proud of myself. And then I was still suffering with negative thoughts and negative feelings, and that was really what I struggled with. And I had triggers, and I knew what would trigger it, and it was almost inevitable. I could see something and it would remind me. I could hear somebody say something and it would remind me, and I would break down all over again. It's like each time I would just break into a million pieces, and that's the only way I can explain it. So my cousin, she's like my best friend. She goes to a private college, and I finally broke down and told her about me being depressed. Only my parents and my husband knew, and I told her, and we just kind of talked about it, and I was like, you know, I don't want to talk about it anymore, but I just wanted to let you know, and I don't want you to worry about me. But you know, because I hadn't talked to her in a while, and I hadn't talked to a lot of people, and I didn't want her to think it was because of her, so I had to kind of explain. But one night I was on the way home, and my medicine had worn off, and I was starting to feel really bad, and she texted me, and I remember she said that some people from her school were going to do like a little like a prayer session, and she said, I need you to call me. So I called her. She was like, Logan, the craziest thing happened. And I was like, okay. And now mind you, this is you know, in the middle of me thinking God had forgotten about me. This is in the middle of, you know, me praying and crying and with my face on the floor and feeling like God was not there. And so she said, well, I was praying with this guy and this girl, and this was my first time meeting them, and this was their first time meeting me. We never knew each other. And she said they started praying over me, and she said the boy who was praying, he laid his hand on her and he said, I don't know why this name keeps coming to my mind. He was like, I don't know if maybe you know this person or if it's somebody that you will know. He was like, but the name that keeps coming up in my head is Logan. And I mean, immediately I almost dropped the phone. And he said this person's going through a tough time, and they're going through the hardest part in their life right now. And God wants you to know that you don't have to feel guilty over what they're going through. And this person does not feel like you should feel guilty. This person does not want you to worry about them. This person does not feel any certain way towards you, and that what they're going through has nothing to do with you. And I didn't realize that when I told her that, she felt some guilt over it, because I guess she felt like she should have known, or that there was something she should have done. But it wasn't like that at all. But instantly, I mean, obviously I'm crying talking about it, but that did something for me, because this total stranger who didn't even know me, didn't even know my cousin, and he just said my name, and God told him, you know, and he made it recognizable that I was going through something through complete strangers. And I thought, all this time that I thought God had forgotten about me, and he hadn't. It was just things had to work in his time. And I cry every time I tell that story, because that really was just that moment for me, like, okay, God heard me. So naturally, I started to feel better, and I was like, okay, well, that means God did not give up on me, and I'm still here for a reason, and that I am gonna get through this. And that gave me, you know, hope. And that is such a powerful story to me. You know, whether it did anything for her or for the people praying over her, but I'm gonna tell you, it really did something for me. And so Christmas Eve, I was starting to panic, and I was starting to have a meltdown. we were with my family and I went into a panic attack, and I just had to shut myself in the bathroom by myself and just kind of just breathe and let it out. I didn't want to worry my family. They came in and checked on me, and so that was that. I told them I was gonna be fine, that I just needed to have a minute, and then I was fine. And the Christmas day, same thing again. I think it's because those big events happening and I was having to be around so many people, that kind of triggered it. So I wanted to see my grandparents on Christmas Day because it's just them two. And so I went to go see them, and I was just sitting there kind of quiet, and they just kind of asked, you know, do you want us to pray over you? And I said, yes, would you please? And so they started praying over me, and instantly I just knew, like, well, I don't know how everybody does in church or what your denomination is, but in my denomination we speak in tongues, and so my grandma is speaking in tongues. Obviously I don't understand what she's saying, but then I start hearing in my head, you no longer are going to feel negativity. You are no longer going to experience negativity. You are no longer going to feel how you feel, and today is the day that it's all going to change. And you're going to lift your head up, and when you leave here, you're going to keep your head up. And I just was like, what? Am I dreaming this? Or like, is this really happening? And I just heard the Holy Spirit in my mind say, keep your head up, because you are a child of God and He is so proud of you. And I remember, obviously because it wasn't long ago, but I could not quit crying, because that was validation for me. That was enough to know, all right, this is it, and I can do it. And there's a reason I'm going through this, and there is, obviously, going through this has completely changed my outlook on life. It's completely changed who I am as a person. You know, when I was going through this, I was like, you know, I've lost myself, and I just wish I could find myself again. And honestly, I am a much better, much more compassionate, much more understanding. I don't know how to explain what I am right now, but I am so much better. And it's funny how God works, because after that I did feel better. I was a lot more sociable. I wanted to start to be around people more. And after that, it's funny because women would sit in my chair, and it'd be women that had been with me since I was in school. So I've been doing their hair for three and a half years. And out of nowhere, they would start talking about their depression. And I would be like, well, how long has this been going on? And they'd be like, well, you know, 2 years, 3 years. What are the odds that as soon as I'm healing, that people are coming and talking to me about this? And it just kind of blew my mind. I thought, this is God making that connection, because He knew that they needed to see somebody who went through it, somebody they didn't even expect would go through it, because they all said, I would never think that you would go through that. Because we go through things not just for us, but for other people, because people who are going through this need to see, well, she got through it and she did it, and so can I. And that's going to give people hope that they can get through it as well. And that's why I am making this video, because I want people to see that I did it, and I'm so much better now. I am so motivated. I actually decided this year, no matter what it takes, I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to be there for people who are going through this, and even if they're not. But it is my goal, because of this video, or if by me going through this and surviving it could help somebody else survive, I couldn't even explain how that would affect me, to know that because I went through it and I came out okay, that somebody else could too, and not in their life, you know. And that is amazing to think about. And that's why we go through things. We go through things for other people, because it has to take somebody to go through hell and come out on fire. And so I don't know, you know, what else to say other than that. That's kind of what I've been through. But I have decided this year if I had to, you know, cut back my work hours to have some more time with my family and my husband, if I have to, you know, take a couple of extra days off work, I'm gonna do it, because ultimately, yes, it's my job and that's my well-being, but this year I'm gonna have to take some time to be happy, and that is so important. I mean, there's so much more to this story, and there's so much more that happened in a lot of ways that God revealed himself, but I'm just like in a whirlwind right now because I've actually never sat down and fully talked about this before, and this is kind of hard because I know I'm about to share this with the world, and that's hard as well, because I don't expect everybody to understand, but I would like to open eyes, and I want you to really pay attention to people who are going through this, whether you don't know them or you do know them, whether you're family or somebody you met once. It is important to let those people know that they're not alone, and to just love them. I know it's hard to love somebody that's depressed. You can ask my husband. I feel really bad a lot because I know that I made our first year of marriage very hard, but he's luckily very forgiving, and he knew I was not well, and so please just have somebody in your corner that will understand and that will still love you through it all, because that is so important. And to have your family and your spouse and people who will love you through it, because ultimately, you know, aside from God really just working a miracle, and my therapist, it's important to have people that you love to love you, and to love you through it, and not make you feel ashamed, and to not make you feel crazy or dramatic or too sensitive, or a lot of the things that I had been called, but that really helped a lot. So I wanted to say thank you to all the people who were there for me through this, even the ones who were there and didn't realize that they were there, like my coworkers and my clients and my friends. I'm so thankful that you guys still stuck around even though you had no idea what was going on with me. That is so important, and I owe a lot to you guys, so thank you. But anyways, I guess this is all I'm gonna share for now, because this is the best way I knew how. I prayed really hard before this, so hopefully I got the message across, and I know that's really emotional, and I'm really sorry, but I could not hold it together for the life of me. But just know that I am so much better. I'm actually off my medication. I have to still take one of them because you can't just like drop it, you know, because there's like crazy side effects, but ultimately I don't really need it, which I'm so thankful for. I wake up so happy now. I'm such a happy person. I feel better than the girl I was before this happened, and I know God has a purpose for my life, and I can't wait to see where it takes me. So if you are feeling suicidal or depressed, please feel free to reach out to me, even if you don't know me, if you're seeing this as a total stranger, because there is hope for you. I promise you, if I can make it, and I am the softest, most sensitive person on the planet, if I can make it through all of it, which there's a lot of details everybody still doesn't know, which I'm sure I'll get to talk about them at another time. If I can do it, I promise you, you can do it. Just know that the reason you're still here and you're still breathing is because God wants you to be here, and that he has purpose for your life. And you know, I went through this for you, and I'm gonna go through it with you, and we're gonna get through it. So thank you to all the people that helped me get through this. I'm so glad that I'm so much better. Thank you to my therapist. Oh my gosh, I really needed that. So anyways, I guess this will be it. I know this was long and probably very sad to watch, and I hope it wasn't, but I hope now that you feel hopeful and you got something from this. So anyways, everything from here on out is gonna be positive, and we're not gonna do this whole sad thing anymore, hopefully. Thank you for watching. This was definitely, I think, the hardest thing I've ever had to film in my entire life. I have been doing YouTube videos since like the 6th grade. So yeah, this was hard. So anyways, I hope you guys got something from this. If you ever need anything, please let me know. I'm not too far away, so thank you guys so much.